The first time he walked into the office, hardly anyone noticed him. He carried an old brown bag and wore a simple shirt that looked like it had been ironed the night before with care. His steps were quiet, his eyes gentle, and there was something about his calm face that made people think he wouldn't last long in such a busy place. The company was full of loud voices, fast talkers, and people who liked to show off how important they were. He wasn't one of them. He smiled politely, nodded when greeted, and quietly found his desk in the corner. At first, no one really paid attention to him. He didn't talk much during meetings and mostly listened. When he did speak, it was in a soft voice that others often talked over. There was one person in the office, a woman who had been there for years, who quickly formed an opinion about him. To her, he seemed weak, unsure, and slow. She was confident, always speaking up, taking charge, and trying to impress the bosses. Whenever he tried to share an idea, she interrupted, finishing his sentences or changing the topic completely. People laughed sometimes, not cruelly, but enough for him to notice. He didn't fight back. He just smiled slightly and went back to his work. She often joked with others about how quiet he was. "He's too soft for this place," she once said loudly enough for him to hear. He wouldn't survive 1 week in a real project. Her friends laughed, and he kept typing on his computer, pretending not to care. But inside, he felt something. Not anger, not sadness, but a calm sense that one day things would be different. He believed that time reveals the truth about people. He didn't need to prove anything just yet. Every day he came early and stayed late. While others rushed out after hours, he remained at his desk, finishing reports or checking details no one else bothered with. He made mistakes, of course, but instead of hiding them, he quietly corrected them and learned. Some evenings, when the office was nearly empty, he'd look out the window at the city lights, thinking about his mother back home. She was ill, and he sent her money every month. That was why he worked so hard. Every small step mattered. Outside the office, his life was far from easy. He lived in a small apartment on the edge of town. The building was old, the elevator often broke, and sometimes the neighbors fought loudly at night. But he didn't complain. He made tea in the evenings, sat by the window, and read about business management or finance on his old phone. He wanted to understand how things worked, not just follow orders. He had dreams, though he didn't talk about them. He wanted to grow, to build something steady, not to impress anyone, but to feel proud when he looked back one day. At work, he was the person everyone came to when they needed small help. Someone forgot how to format a report. He helped. Another colleague's computer froze. He fixed it. Even the woman who often teased him would sometimes ask, "Can you just quickly check this for me?" He always did, without hesitation. He didn't keep score. He believed helping others was part of being human. Still, people mistook his kindness for weakness. During one team project, the woman took most of the credit for a plan he had built quietly in the background. When the boss praised her, she smiled confidently, while he stood in the corner with his usual quiet expression. A few people noticed, but he didn't say anything. Later that night, when he was leaving, one of the younger workers asked him why he didn't speak up. He smiled and said, "It's okay. Let her have the moment. Everyone gets what they earn in the long run." The younger worker didn't understand then, but those words stayed with him. Weeks passed and the office stayed busy as ever. There were always new deadlines, new meetings, and new gossip. The woman kept getting attention for her boldness and quick talk, while he stayed in the background. Yet, something was changing quietly. His reports were always accurate. His solutions worked when others failed. When he gave advice, even the manager started to listen more carefully. Slowly, without meaning to, he was becoming someone people depended on when things went wrong, but he never changed his attitude. He still greeted everyone the same way, still spoke softly, still stayed late when no one noticed. He carried an old notebook where he wrote down ideas, ways to make the department work better, things he could improve in himself, lessons from every mistake. That notebook became his silent companion, a record of patience and effort that no one else saw. One Friday evening, after a long meeting, the woman dropped a pile of papers near his desk. "Could you check these before Monday?" she said casually. I'll be too busy over the weekend." She didn't say thank you. He looked at the stack, smiled lightly, and nodded. He spent his entire weekend working on it, fixing errors and improving the presentation. When Monday came, she handed it to the boss without mentioning his name. The presentation went well, and the boss praised her again. He sat quietly in the back, sipping his coffee, and said nothing. But he didn't feel bitter. Deep down, he believed something she didn't, that patience was a kind of power. Not everyone could wait, observe, and stay calm when things felt unfair. Most people rushed to prove themselves. He chose a different path. He believed that real strength wasn't about showing it, but holding it steady when no one else could see. Every day tested him in small ways. The woman's remarks, the long hours, the feeling of being invisible. Each one could have broken his spirit, but he used them to build himself instead. He learned to stay centered, to breathe before reacting, to focus on what he could control. His quietness wasn't fear, it was discipline. One evening, when the office lights were dim and only a few people were left, the woman walked past his desk and stopped. "You're still here?" she asked. "You really don't have a life outside this place, do you?" Her tone was teasing, but not as harsh as before. He looked up, smiled, and said softly, "I'm just doing what needs to be done." She shrugged and walked away, but for some reason his calm answer stayed with her. It was the first time she realized he wasn't just quiet, he was steady. As the months went by, the gap between how people saw him and who he really was started to grow smaller. A few of his colleagues began noticing how much he contributed. They started thanking him more, asking for his opinion during meetings. Even the boss once said, "You're one of the few people I can rely on when things get messy." He just nodded humbly, but inside, he felt something warm, like all his quiet days were finally beginning to mean something. He never set out to impress anyone, yet his patience was slowly turning into respect. And though he didn't know it yet, the woman who once thought he was powerless would soon learn just how strong he truly was. Because the thing about patience is, it waits for the right moment. And his moment was coming. The months passed quietly, but he never stopped working hard. Every morning he reached the office before the others, turning on the lights and making coffee for himself before the noise began. He liked those first few minutes of peace when the building was still half asleep. It gave him time to breathe, to plan his day, and to prepare himself for whatever came next. The woman often arrived later, confident and loud, walking past his desk without much notice. She was always in a hurry, always talking to someone important. To her, he was still the same quiet man doing small tasks that no one else wanted to do. But behind his calm expression, life was heavy. His mother's health was getting worse, and the hospital bills were growing. Every night after work, he sat in his small apartment counting money, making sure he could still send enough for her medicine. Sometimes he skipped meals to save money. Yet, he never complained. He told himself it was just another test of patience. He worked harder, picked up more hours, and even did small freelance jobs online after midnight. Sleep became a luxury, but he didn't mind. As long as his mother could rest peacefully, it was worth it. One Monday morning, the woman entered the office wearing a bright smile. She had been chosen to lead an upcoming company project, a big opportunity everyone wanted. She felt proud, almost unstoppable. During the first project meeting, she took control immediately, giving orders and talking fast. He sat quietly, taking notes, watching her energy fill the room. She barely looked at him, except when she needed someone to handle the small details. "You can take care of the numbers," she said without really asking. He nodded. He always did. The project started off well, but soon the cracks began to show. The deadlines were tight, the client was demanding, and the team was exhausted. The woman's confidence started turning into frustration. Whenever something went wrong, she blamed others. When data didn't match, she scolded the staff. But through all the chaos, he stayed calm. When a system failed late at night, he stayed behind to fix it. When others forgot to send reports, he quietly did it for them. He didn't want praise, he just didn't want to see the project collapse. Sometimes, while he worked alone, He thought about the way people saw him. He knew they thought he was quiet because he was afraid to speak. But it wasn't fear. He simply believed that talking didn't always solve things. Action did. He knew that one good deed was stronger than 1,000 loud promises. Still, it hurt sometimes to be invisible, to watch others take credit for his effort. But he reminded himself of what his mother once told him. The strongest trees grow in silence. One evening, after everyone left, he was still at his desk. The office was dark except for the light above him. His eyes were tired, but he was focused on fixing a spreadsheet that had gone wrong. Suddenly, he heard footsteps. It was the woman. She looked frustrated and tired. "You're still here?" she asked. "I thought I was the only one working late." He looked up and gave a small smile. "Almost done," he said softly. She sighed and sat at a nearby desk. For the first time, they worked in silence together. She didn't talk, and he didn't either, but something in the air was different. She wasn't mocking him tonight. She was tired, and for a brief moment she saw the calm in him as something strong, not weak. Days turned into weeks, and the project grew more complicated. The client changed demands, and tension filled the office. One afternoon, the woman snapped at him in front of everyone. "Why didn't you tell me about this earlier?" she shouted, frustrated. He looked at her calmly and said, "I did, last Thursday in the report." The room went quiet. She remembered, embarrassed, that he was right. She mumbled something and walked away. He didn't react, didn't defend himself further. He simply went back to work. The rest of the team saw it, his quiet strength, his refusal to argue. It made them respect him in a way they hadn't before. Behind the scenes, he started helping others too. When junior employees struggled with data or reports, he guided them patiently. They came to trust him, knowing he'd never make them feel small for asking questions. The woman noticed that the team seemed to rely on him more than her. It bothered her at first. She didn't understand how someone so quiet could earn so much loyalty. But deep down, a part of her began to admire it. One morning she arrived early and found him already there as usual. He was fixing a printer that had jammed again. "Do you ever stop working?" she asked half-jokingly. He smiled, wiped his hands and said, "Work keeps me moving. It helps me forget things I can't fix." She didn't ask what he meant, but something about his answer stayed with her. It was the first time she saw a small glimpse of his life beyond the office. A quiet man carrying heavy things without ever showing the weight. As the project neared its deadline, a major problem hit. The client rejected an entire set of documents saying they were incorrect. The woman panicked. The team blamed her, and she, in turn, blamed them. The situation spiraled fast, and the manager demanded a solution within 2 days. That night, when everyone left in frustration, he stayed behind again. He worked until morning, checking each document, correcting the errors, and rewriting the data presentation. By sunrise, the files were perfect. He emailed them to the manager, mentioning that they were ready. He didn't mention he had done it alone. When the manager reviewed the new documents, he called a sudden meeting. Everyone gathered nervously, expecting bad news. But instead, the manager smiled. "The issue is fixed," he said. "The client is satisfied. Whoever stayed up to correct this saved us all." The room was silent. The woman looked at him and realized who it was. She wanted to say something, but he just looked down at his notebook, pretending to check something. The manager praised the entire team, and the project continued smoothly. After the meeting, the woman approached him quietly. "You fixed it, didn't you?" she asked. He didn't answer directly. "It doesn't matter who did," he said softly. "What matters is that it's done." She looked at him, not sure how to respond. For the first time, she felt something strange, respect mixed with guilt. She had spent months treating him like someone small, and yet here he was, holding everything together without a word of complaint. That night, when she went home, she couldn't stop thinking about him. She realized that power didn't always show itself in loud voices or quick actions. Sometimes it lived quietly in people who never stopped trying, even when no one thanked them. She began to see him differently, not as powerless, but as someone deeply patient, quietly strong. Meanwhile, his life outside work stayed the same. His mother's condition got worse, and he visited her every weekend, bringing flowers and sitting by her bedside for hours. She smiled weakly, holding his hand, telling him how proud she was. "You're stronger than you think," she whispered once. He didn't tell her about his troubles or how tired he felt. He didn't want to worry her. All he wanted was to make her proud before it was too late. The next week, the project was finally completed. The company celebrated the success, giving most of the credit to the woman as the official leader. He stood in the background again, clapping politely with the others. But this time, when she looked at him, her smile was different. Not proud, but thankful. And though no one said it out loud, everyone in that room knew who had truly carried the team when things were falling apart. He didn't need applause or recognition. For him, the quiet satisfaction of knowing he did his best was enough. He still sat at his same desk, still worked the same hours, still greeted everyone with kindness. But something inside him had grown stronger. He knew his patience had power. He knew that being silent didn't mean being weak. And though he couldn't see it yet, his time to rise was slowly approaching. Patience had carried him this far, and it would carry him further still. When the project ended successfully, life at the office slowly returned to normal. The woman had received most of the credit, but deep down, she knew it was not truly hers to claim. Still, she didn't mention it to anyone, and he didn't expect her to. He just continued working quietly, moving from one task to another as if nothing had changed. Yet something inside her had shifted. She had begun to notice the small things about him. The way he always greeted the cleaner, the way he stayed calm during stressful days, and how he treated everyone with respect, even those who didn't deserve it. But peace never lasted long in that company. A few months later, the management announced a massive new project. It was the biggest one the company had ever taken, involving multiple teams and an international client. Everyone was excited but nervous. The woman was again selected to lead, as she had proven herself in the previous one. The quiet man was assigned to her team once more. This time she didn't roll her eyes when she saw his name. Instead, she felt a strange comfort knowing he'd be there. The pressure began immediately. Meetings stretched for hours, deadlines piled up, and tempers grew short. The woman tried to stay in control, but things were more complicated than before. The client wanted constant updates, and even small mistakes led to big arguments. The man watched everything quietly, noting down the problems others ignored. He often stayed after meetings to double-check figures, making sure the data was correct before being sent. More than once, he caught an error that could have caused serious trouble. He fixed them silently, never taking credit. One afternoon, the client sent a harsh email threatening to cancel the deal because of repeated delays. The office atmosphere grew tense. The woman looked defeated. For the first time, she admitted to herself that she didn't have all the answers. During a late meeting, her voice trembled as she tried to explain the plan. People began to lose faith in her leadership. The manager looked frustrated, and the team was falling apart. That night, after everyone left, she sat alone at her desk, holding her head in her hands. She didn't notice he was still there, sitting quietly across the room, working on his computer. He looked up and saw her shoulders shaking slightly. Without saying anything, he stood up, poured her a cup of water, and placed it on her desk. She looked up, surprised. "You're still here?" she asked weakly. He nodded. "There's still time to fix things," he said calmly. "We just need to organize better." His tone wasn't proud or judgmental. It was reassuring, like someone offering a hand instead of advice. For a moment, she felt like the roles had reversed. She, the loud leader, was now the one lost. And he, the quiet worker, was guiding her. They stayed in the office late that night, working side by side. He helped her sort through the reports, clean up the data, and rebuild the plan. She watched him closely as he worked. His patience amazed her. He didn't rush, didn't complain, and didn't try to show off. Every step he took was careful and steady. The more time she spent with him, the more she realized how wrong she had been about him. He wasn't powerless, he was controlled. He wasn't silent out of fear. He was quiet because he understood that noise didn't fix problems, but action did. The next morning, she presented their revised plan to the manager. This time it worked perfectly. The numbers were clear, the timeline made sense, and the team had direction again. The manager looked impressed. "Good work," he said. "This is exactly what we needed." The woman smiled faintly, glancing at him across the table. He just nodded slightly, avoiding attention, but she knew he had saved them again. Over the next few weeks, things started to improve. The client was satisfied, and the project moved forward smoothly. Everyone in the office noticed how organized the team had become. What they didn't see was how much of that came from him, quietly supporting everything behind the scenes. Whenever there was confusion, he clarified it. When people argued, he calmed them down. When tasks were delayed, he stayed late to finish them. Slowly, even the manager began to rely on him more. The woman, on the other hand, started changing too. She stopped interrupting others in meetings. She started listening more, asking for advice and acknowledging other people's efforts. It wasn't easy for her. She had always believed that power meant being the loudest in the room. But seeing him work taught her something different. She began to understand that real power was about control, humility, and patience. She started watching how he handled pressure, how he kept his composure no matter what, and she tried to follow that example. One evening after a long day, she found him sitting by the window of the office cafeteria. He was eating a simple sandwich, looking out at the dark city. She sat beside him, something she had never done before. "You never seem to get tired," she said, half smiling. He chuckled softly. "I do," he said, "but tiredness is part of life. You just learn to move through it." She looked at him for a moment, wondering how he managed to stay so balanced. "You're different," she said quietly. "You don't let things get to you." He looked at her and replied, "They do. I just don't let them decide who I am." That answer stayed in her mind long after she went home. As the project neared its final stage, the company faced an unexpected blow. The client changed the requirement suddenly, demanding the entire plan be adjusted within 2 weeks. It was almost impossible. The team panicked, and even the manager seemed lost. The woman tried to stay calm, but the pressure was too much. She looked at him during the emergency meeting and said, "Can you help me again?" He nodded without hesitation. "We'll fix it," he said simply. For the next 2 weeks, he barely slept. He worked through weekends, double-checking every section of the project, rewriting data and coordinating between teams. The woman worked alongside him, sometimes in silence, sometimes exchanging short words of encouragement. The office felt different now. It wasn't just noise and stress. There was teamwork, respect, and quiet determination. Everyone noticed that things seemed to work better when he was around. His calmness spread like a quiet wave. Finally, the deadline arrived. The project was submitted successfully, and the client's feedback was overwhelmingly positive. The manager called the whole team into the conference room to announce the good news. "We did it," he said proudly. "This is one of the best projects we've ever delivered." Everyone clapped and cheered. The woman smiled, feeling relieved. For the first time, she turned to the team and said, "This wouldn't have been possible without him." The room went silent for a moment as everyone turned to look at the quiet man in the corner. He looked surprised but grateful. It was the first time anyone had publicly acknowledged his effort. Later that day, the manager called him into his office. He told him that the company directors had noticed his consistent work and wanted to meet him. They had seen how he managed the crisis without being asked, how his patience held the team together. They were considering him for a leadership role. He listened quietly, nodding as the words sank in. He wasn't expecting it. He had never worked for recognition, but it had found him anyway. When he walked out of the office, the woman was waiting in the hallway. She smiled genuinely and said, "I'm proud of you." He smiled back, replying softly, "Thank you." There was no pride in his voice, just calm satisfaction. He had waited silently for so long, never demanding attention, never chasing credit. But now his patience was finally being seen for what it truly was, a quiet kind of power. As he left the building that evening, the city lights reflected on the glass doors. He paused for a moment, looking at his reflection. He didn't see the tired, unnoticed man he used to be. He saw someone who had built his strength through calm, through kindness and through endurance. He took a deep breath, feeling peace settle in his chest. The world hadn't changed much, but he had. And though he still walked with the same quiet steps this time, they carried a quiet confidence. His time had come and he didn't need to announce it. Patience had spoken for him. The day he was called in for the meeting with the company directors, he felt strangely calm. He didn't rush, didn't dress differently, and didn't try to impress anyone. He just wore his usual neatly ironed shirt, carried his same old brown bag, and walked into the conference room with his quiet confidence. Inside, the directors sat around a large table, papers spread out in front of them. They had been following his work for months, quietly observing how he had managed to solve problems, guide his team, and stay composed through every crisis. The meeting wasn't long. They spoke about the company's growth, about leadership, and about how he had become a quiet pillar everyone could depend on. Then one of them smiled and said, "We want you to lead the new department. You've earned it." For a moment, he just sat there surprised. He wasn't used to praise. He had spent years working in silence, doing his job because it was the right thing to do, not because someone was watching. He thanked them sincerely, his voice steady but warm. As he walked out of the room, he didn't feel excitement or pride. He felt peace. All those years of patience, all those late nights had finally led him here. News spread quickly around the office. People were surprised, though not everyone showed it. Some said he deserved it. Others whispered that they never saw it coming. The woman who had once looked down on him stood by her desk, quietly listening to the chatter. She remembered the times she had spoken over him, dismissed his ideas, and treated him as if he were invisible. Now he was her department head. When he walked past her desk that morning, she looked up, unsure what to say. He gave her a gentle nod and said, "Good morning." His tone was the same as always, calm, kind, and without any hint of arrogance. It made her feel both relieved and ashamed at the same time. Over the next few weeks, he adjusted to his new position. His office wasn't large, but it had a window overlooking the city. He often stood there in the evenings, watching people rushing home, thinking about how different his life had become. Despite the promotion, he remained the same person. He still arrived early, still greeted everyone politely, and still helped anyone who asked. He didn't change the way he treated people. In fact, he went out of his way to make sure others didn't feel the way he once did, ignored and underestimated. The woman, now working under his leadership, found herself struggling with guilt. Every time she saw him calmly guiding the team, her mind went back to how unfair she had been to him. She finally decided to speak up. One afternoon, when most people had left, she knocked on his door. He looked up from his papers and smiled. "Come in," he said softly. She stepped inside, hesitating for a moment before speaking. "I wanted to say something," she began. "Back when you first joined, I didn't treat you right. I thought you were weak. I was wrong." She paused, looking down. "I'm sorry." He listened quietly, then stood up and walked around the desk. "It's okay," he said. "We all see people through our own eyes. Sometimes it just takes time to see clearly." She looked up at him, surprised by how gentle his response was. He didn't hold any resentment, didn't try to make her feel small. Instead, his words carried a sense of peace that made her respect him even more. From that day forward, her attitude changed completely. She started working harder, speaking more kindly to others, and focusing on listening instead of leading through pride. The company soon began to see the results of his leadership. Teams worked together better. People stayed longer, not because they were forced to, but because they wanted to. The atmosphere had changed. He had built something rare, a workplace where people felt respected and supported. His secret wasn't strict rules or loud speeches. It was patience, understanding, and quiet strength. One day, the company organized a meeting with all the departments. The directors praised the overall progress and asked him to speak. He didn't like attention, but he stood up anyway. Looking around the room, he said in a simple, steady voice, "When I first came here, I didn't know much about leadership. I only knew that every small act matters. You don't have to be the loudest to make a difference. You just have to care." His words were plain, but they carried a truth that everyone could feel. The room stayed silent for a moment before people began to clap. Even those who had never spoken to him felt inspired. After the meeting, the woman walked up to him and said, "You've changed this place." He smiled. "No," he said softly. "We all did together." That was the kind of person he was. Never taking full credit, always sharing it with others. Outside of work, his life slowly became easier too. His mother's health had stabilized, and he had moved her to a better home closer to him. Every weekend he visited her, bringing her small gifts and stories from his week. She listened proudly, smiling at how far her son had come. "See," she would say, "I told you patience would take you places." He always smiled back, thinking of all the nights he'd stayed awake, worrying, doubting, and pushing himself forward quietly. It all made sense now. One evening, after everyone had left the office, he sat by the window again, watching the city lights flicker like tiny stars. The woman knocked on his door, holding 2 cups of tea. "Thought you might still be here," she said. He smiled, gesturing for her to come in. They sat in silence for a while, sipping their tea. After a few minutes, she said, "You know, I used to think being strong meant always being right. But now I see it's about staying calm when everything feels wrong." He nodded, looking out at the lights. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "strength looks like waiting when everyone else is rushing." There was a long silence after that, but it wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. Like 2 people finally understanding something about life that words could never fully explain. When she left, she thanked him, not just for the tea, but for the lessons she had learned through him. He smiled and said, "We all learn from each other. That's how we grow." As the months passed, the company continued to thrive under his leadership. People began to call him the heart of the office. Whenever someone had a problem, personal or professional, they came to him for advice. He never turned anyone away. He listened, thought for a moment, and gave honest, kind answers. He wasn't just a boss now, he was a mentor, a guide, someone others looked up to, not out of fear but respect. The woman, who once mocked his quietness, now spoke about him with admiration. She often told new employees, "You'll learn a lot here, especially from him. Just watch how he handles things." And when she said it, she meant it. Her respect was real, born from the lessons she had learned the hard way. But he never changed his ways. He still walked to work instead of driving, still packed his lunch, still stayed late when things got tough. Power never changed him because he never wanted it for control. He wanted it for purpose. To him, being a leader wasn't about standing above others. It was about standing with them. One late evening, he received an email from the director congratulating him for his performance and offering him another promotion, this time a regional position. It was a big step. He stared at the screen for a while, thinking about all the years that had brought him here. The long nights, the quiet patience, the moments when no one believed in him. And now here it was, the result of all that silent work. He leaned back in his chair, smiling softly. It wasn't the promotion that made him happy. It was the journey. The quiet path he had taken, the lessons he had learned, and the people he had helped along the way. As he turned off the lights and walked out of the office, he felt something deeper than pride. He felt gratitude. He had waited patiently and life had finally answered. The world hadn't handed him power. He had earned it through patience. And that made all the difference. The morning after he received the promotion email, he woke up before sunrise, just as he always did. The streets outside were still quiet, the kind of silence that only exists before the city fully wakes up. He sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the sky slowly turn from gray to gold. For a long time, he just sat there thinking, not about his new title, but about how far life had brought him. It wasn't the success that filled his heart that morning. It was peace, the kind that comes only after years of walking a hard road with steady patience. When he reached the office later that day, the entire team was waiting for him with smiles and applause. They had already heard the news. He tried to stop them from making a fuss, but they insisted on celebrating. Someone had brought in cake and coffee, and the woman who used to overlook him stood near the front holding a small bouquet of flowers. She stepped forward, smiling warmly. "You've earned this," she said quietly. He nodded with a soft smile. "We all earned it," he replied, meaning every word. Even after accepting the new position, he didn't change his ways. He spent his last few days in that office helping his team finish a project, making sure everyone understood their new roles before he left. Instead of giving orders, he gave advice. Instead of talking about himself, he asked how everyone else was doing. To him, leadership had never been about being above people. It was about walking beside them. On his last day, before moving to the regional office, he gathered the team in the meeting room. Everyone expected a big speech, but he spoke in his usual calm voice. "I want you all to remember something," he said. "Patience doesn't mean waiting and doing nothing. It means working quietly while trusting that the right moment will come. I learned that the hard way." The room was silent. Every face there showed respect, even emotion. They knew he wasn't just giving advice, he was sharing the truth that had shaped his entire life. After he left the office that evening, he took a long walk through the city. The cool breeze brushed against his face and he smiled at the familiar streets, the small shops, the same bus stop where he used to stand years ago, waiting in the rain after long shifts. Back then, he often wondered if life would ever change. Now looking back, he realized it had changed not because of luck or shortcuts, but because of quiet endurance. When he started his new position, the challenges were bigger, the responsibilities were heavier, but he was ready. His new office had a view of the city skyline, and though everything around him seemed larger and faster, he stayed grounded. He worked just as he always had, calmly, thoughtfully, with kindness at the center of every decision. He treated the new employees the same way he once wished to be treated, with respect and patience. At first, many of the new team members didn't know much about him. They assumed he was another strict regional head, but soon they realized he was different. He remembered everyone's names, asked about their families, and took time to listen. Slowly, his quiet influence spread again. People started to open up, to trust, to care about their work more deeply. His way of leading changed the mood of the entire branch. Problems were still there, but they were handled with calm rather than panic. One evening, he got a call from the woman back at his old office. She told him how much the team missed him, how the lessons he had taught them continued to guide their work. "Things are different now," she said. "People talk more kindly. There's less competition, more teamwork. You left your mark here." He smiled softly and said, "That makes me happy. That's all I ever wanted." When he hung up, he sat quietly, thinking about how patience, once seen as weakness, had become his greatest strength. Months passed. His work brought him into meetings with senior leaders from other regions. Many admired his steady results and calm demeanor. Some tried to rush him, to push for faster changes, but he never let pressure shake him. He believed good things grew at their own pace. That belief made him different in a world that always demanded speed. Slowly, his style began to inspire others too. People started saying, "He's slow to speak, but when he does, it's always worth hearing." Despite his growing reputation, he never lost his simple habits. He still packed his own lunch, still stopped to talk to the security guards, still thanked the cleaning staff by name. It wasn't something he did for show, it was just who he was. One day, during a company-wide event, one of the new employees approached him nervously. "Sir," she said, "how do you stay so calm? Don't you ever get tired of being patient?" He smiled gently. "Of course I do," he said. "But I've learned that rushing doesn't make life easier. It just makes mistakes faster. Patience is like breathing. It keeps you steady when the world isn't." Later that night, after the event ended, he walked outside and looked up at the night sky. The stars were faint behind the city lights, but they were still there, just as they always had been. It reminded him of himself, quiet, steady, often overlooked, but constant. He thought about his journey, the struggles, the people who doubted him, and the ones who believed in him along the way. Every moment had shaped him into who he had become. He didn't feel the need to prove anything anymore. He had already proved it to himself. Years passed and his patience became legendary within the company. Whenever someone was frustrated or discouraged, they would hear someone say, "Remember how he handled things? Stay patient. It works." His story quietly spread beyond the office, inspiring people he had never even met. Eventually, he decided to retire. The decision came naturally. He had spent decades giving his time, his energy, and his heart to his work. Now it was time to slow down. Not because he was tired, but because he wanted to enjoy the simple things he had once postponed. The company organized a farewell gathering for him. Everyone came, old colleagues, new employees, even directors from other regions. The room was filled with warmth and respect. When it was his turn to speak, he stood at the front, his voice steady as always. "I've learned something important in all these years," he said. "People may forget your title, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. Be kind, be patient. Life has a way of rewarding those who wait without bitterness." When he finished, the entire room stood and clapped. Some had tears in their eyes. It wasn't just a farewell. It was a moment of gratitude from all the lives he had quietly touched. After that day, he began a new chapter of life. He spent his mornings walking in the park, talking to neighbors and helping children with their studies at a small community center nearby. He enjoyed the slow rhythm of his days. There was no rush, no deadlines, just peace. Sometimes people from his old office would visit him, bringing stories of how things were going. They always said the same thing: "It's not the same without you." He would smile and reply, "That means I did something right." One evening, as the sun set, he sat on a bench watching the light fade behind the trees. A cool wind blew, carrying with it the sounds of laughter and life all around. He thought about the path that had brought him here, the moments of struggle, the times he had been overlooked, the patience that had carried him through. And he realized something beautiful. He had never really been powerless. He had always had the quiet strength that others couldn't see. The world had just needed time to catch up and recognize it. He leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment, letting the peace of the evening settle around him. Life had tested him, taught him, and finally rewarded him, not with wealth or fame, but with contentment. And as the last rays of sunlight disappeared, he smiled softly, whispering to himself, "Patience was never weakness. It was my greatest power all along."